Killed Storytelling by Michael Arturo. Conclusion. Back in his cluttered office, Giordano propped his feet up on his desk, greeted by the unexpected sight of his name plastered across the afternoon paper. Yet, to his dismay, the article painted him as a bumbling fool, courtesy of the sensationalism typical of yellow journalism. According to the piece, the democratization of literature, where books transitioned from exclusive hardcovers to accessible paperbacks, spelled doom for storytelling. It was a stark departure from Gutenberg's vision, marking a demise foretold by the proliferation of literature in all corners of society. However, amidst the ashes of storytelling's demise, the article argued, truth in journalism stood as a beacon of integrity and reliability. Suddenly, the door to his office swung open, and in walked a woman who made Giordano do an immediate double-take. Her name was Dolores Weingarten. She was a woman who could make even a seasoned detective like Philly Giordano go silly and lose his train of thought. A red-headed siren with sea-green eyes that held secrets deeper than the East River and were just as polluted. She had an alluring presence that could make a weak man even weaker. But that's not all. Her legs seemed to stretch on forever, and her derriere, well, let's say it was hard not to notice. Giordano couldn't help but drool and sweat bullets like a schoolboy with an insatiable crush on his home economics teacher. "Detective Giordano, I presume," she hushed. "Yes, at your, service, madam. What can I do for you?" "I'm the widow of late great Harold Weingarten, the famous novelist." Her ex, it turns out, was a hard-drinking Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist with a penchant for self-destruction. Harold Weingarten took a fatal plunge off the Brooklyn Bridge just a month prior. He was the talk of every literary circle in town, but led a hard-scrabbled life accompanied by a seething temper, a virtual swirling vortex of talent and torment. A week or two before his untimely exit, he returned home to their Gramercy Park brownstone in a drunken stupor, his words slurred but his intentions clear. He threw Dolores down on the bed, which set her off. Not that she didn't like it rough, but the kinky stuff was on her terms and her terms alone. "You want to know the truth about fiction, Dolores?" he shouted in a fit of insanity. "It's all a damn lie. For centuries, writers have been covering it up. Everyone from Shakespeare to Hemingway, from Euripides to Norman Mailer. They were all in on it. Literature, it's all a bunch of hogwash. Atticus Finch, Madame Bovary, Captain Ahab, Lady Macbeth, and the Mad Hatter. None of them were real. It's about time someone did something about it." The words echoed in Giordano's mind as he sat across from Dolores in his office, the air thick with the scent of old books and lingering questions. Could her ex's mad ramblings hold a clue to who killed storytelling? Was he a victim or a perpetrator in this literary homicide? And what role did Dolores play in this intricate cat-and-mouse game? Giordano looked into her sea-green eyes, searching for a sign, a glimmer of truth in a world drowning in lies. And as he did, he realized that the answer lay not in what was said, but in what was left unsaid, in the spaces between words, in the margins of the text, in the silent depths of a gaze. At that moment, Giordano understood that storytelling was not just an act of creation, but also an act of revelation, a mirror that reflected what we wanted and needed to see. And as he delved deeper, he found himself investigating the death of storytelling and its rebirth and resurrection from the ashes of cynicism and despair. With her enigmatic beauty and tragic past, Dolores was both a muse and a mystery, a key to a lock he had yet to find. And as he unraveled the threads of her story, Giordano discovered that the line between fiction and reality was not a boundary, but a bridge. This bridge led to the heart of the human condition, to the essence of what it means to live, love, and tell a tale worth telling. And so, in a city of endless noise, Detective Giordano found a story that spoke in whispers, a narrative that defied easy answers, but demanded to be heard. It was a story that reminded him why he became a detective in the first place. Not just to solve crimes, but to shine a light on the essence of the soul and the darkest corners of the human psyche. As Dolores sashayed out of his office, her perfume lingering like the faintest echo of a siren's goodbye, Giordano leaned back in his chair. The city outside his window pulsed with its usual rhythm, horns blaring, engines growling, lives unraveling. But something was different now. The case wasn't closed, but his resolve was sealed tighter than a paperback on a dusty shelf. The death of storytelling wasn't inevitable, no matter how many villains had conspired to choke the life out of it. Stories, real stories, were messy, flawed, and unruly, much like the city he called home. And just like New York, they refused to die. But irony, that sly devil, had one more trick in store. Chief Schmidt, the man Giordano had trusted to shepherd the investigation, had sold the case for a mere $100, a tell-all book deal that would tell nothing. The chief's silence had been bought. His pen turned against the cause, leaving Giordano to shoulder the weight of the truth alone. Giordano could see the bitter humor of it all. A book, a supposed vessel of revelation, transformed into a tomb for the narrative it claimed to illuminate. Yet this betrayal only steeled him further. If storytelling was to be saved, it couldn't be bought, bribed, or buried. It had to fight its way back tooth and nail, word by word. With this knowledge, Giordano returned to his typewriter, where a blank sheet of paper sat waiting like a challenge. But as he began his slow revival of the written word, life found a way to interrupt. Life in the form of Jane. It had been years since they'd shared cigarettes and stolen kisses in dim Greenwich Village cafes. Back then, she'd been the muse to his ambitions, an idealist who believed words could shake the world. But time had weathered them both, the idealism giving way to something quieter, steadier. Jane had resurfaced one night at a poetry reading, her eyes alight with the same spark that once drew him in. Over coffee, she spoke of her own disillusionment, how the world had drowned her stories in deadlines and marketability. Yet here they were again, back in each other's orbit, two wounded storytellers circling the same flame. Now, Jane sat across from him at the office desk, her presence grounding him as he worked through drafts. She teased him for his habit of quoting dead authors mid-sentence and laughed when he growled at a jammed typewriter key. They were two imperfect people trying to rewrite a story that had once ended too soon. And in the flicker of her smile, Giordano saw something he hadn't felt in years. Hope, not just for storytelling, but for himself. As the night deepened, the city lights painting the room in streaks of amber and gray, Giordano typed with purpose. The ghosts of Faulkner, Thoreau, Steinbeck, and the rest loomed over him from the shelves, their voices whispering through the ink-stained air. He wrote not as a detective solving a case, but as a witness testifying to the resilience of humanity. He wrote of villains who sought to destroy, of heroes who refused to yield, and of a love that rekindled even in the darkest hours. The words came fast, raw, and imperfect, but alive. Every keystroke felt like a small rebellion against the creeping void. Then came the revelation. In the quiet hum of the typewriter, Giordano understood what had eluded him all along. The killer he sought wasn't a person, a corporation, or even a machine. It was an idea, a corrosive notion that stories no longer mattered. The only way to defeat it was with a better idea, a narrative strong enough to remind the world why storytelling was vital, why it bound humanity together across time and space. His sanctuary became a battleground, the typewriter, his weapon. He struck keys like blows against complacency, crafting a story that dared to confront the forces of silence and stagnation. And through the haze of effort and exhaustion, Jane became his steadying force. Her quiet presence reminding him that storytelling wasn't just about heroes and villains. It was about connection. It was about love. It was about finding the threads that tied one soul to another and weaving them into something greater. As dawn broke over the city, Giordano sat back and surveyed the pages before him. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. The story, his story, was ready to be told. In the days that followed, Giordano's work began to ripple out into the world. It wasn't just his words that rekindled the flame, but the spirit behind them. Others, inspired by his defiance, began to pick up their pens and pound their keyboards. Stories began to flow again, defying the algorithms and market trends that had sought to silence them. The minotaur that threatened to devour storytelling wasn't slain in a single stroke, but weakened, forced back into the shadows by the light of collective creativity. And as for Giordano and Jane, their story continued, an imperfect romance in a world of imperfection. Together, they walked the streets of the city that never slept, trading lines of poetry and prose like promises. They didn't need to solve every mystery or conquer every foe. They only needed to keep telling the story, to keep the flame alive. In the end, Giordano realized that storytelling was not dead. It had only been sleeping, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to wake it. The pen, after all, was not just mightier than the sword. It was a beacon, a weapon, and a lifeline. And as long as there were people willing to wield it, the world would never go dark. The end.